sun being followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow, leaping and hopping on a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow. And if I ever lose my hands, lose my plow, lose my lands, as if I ever lose my hands, oh, if I won't have to work no more. Hey there friends, how's it going today? David Potts with Song Notes here, and today we're looking at Moonshadow by Cat Stevens, an amazingly fun song to play. He was one of the reasons I picked up the guitar 25 years ago, and I'm happy to finally learn this song in a way I feel proud about. So here's the deal. In the second half of this lesson, I'm going to show you the fingerstyle intro. So skip ahead if that's all you care about, right? That's a lot trickier to play than the strumming part. So I'm going to start with the strumming. I'm going to focus on a campfire version. I'm going to round a few of the sharper edges as far as the difficult chord changes he throws in there, but I want to give you something you can get going, sing this song, campfire casual situation for most guitarists. It's going to be really fun, right? So stick around and look at my website, songnotes.net, for all the lesson materials I have for this lesson. Also link to a few other teachers teaching it. If you don't like the fact that I'm rounding some of those corners and simplifying things, you're free to check those out as well. But I have a nice curated selection of all my resources and a few pics from other teachers there at songnotes.net. That's my official website. So let's start with the intro and verse progression, right? Now it's 4 beats per measure. And if you looked at the progression, big picture, it's just D and G. Technically, I think Cat Stevens is including an A7 just for 1 beat, but I'm going to skip that because that's one of those things that you don't need to do, and you can still sort of make this song sound good with just 2 chords, okay? So from a chord point of view, I think the easiest way to do this is to play your D like you normally would play a D. And for the G, I would keep your ring finger there, right, on the 2nd string, 3rd fret, if you're comfortable with this 4-finger version of G, because this lets you get between the D and the G with 1 finger sort of being that sort of pivot point where it kind of stays still, and it's a nice sort of just a tactile point of reference, okay? You could play the G using 3 fingers if you want, right? Any G is going to work for you. See my beginner chord guide lesson on G major to show you all the options for playing that chord, but I'm going to be using these. Now, the progression itself for that intro and for that verse section, right? D, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, D, 2, G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4. And then you repeat that, right? So D, 2, 3, 4 to G to D, then G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's the counting. The counting happens at a steady tempo. That's the important part. Whether you count slow or fast, you want it to be steady, right? You can put the metronome on, whatever you want. I think 130 or so is what Cat Stevens is playing. It's a bit of a breezy tempo. Slow things down if it's tricky. Now, easiest strum you would use for this is just down strums on the 1 and the 3 count, right? This is a real beginner sort of strum, but it helps you get through things, right? So, yes, I'm being followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, G and D, and G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you can get through the whole song like that using a simple strum. You don't need to get fancier out of the gate. Using a simple strum helps you get comfortable with the song, the chord changes, all that sort of thing. You can start to sing along, and then you can start to bring in the trickier strumming patterns, which I'll show you as you get more comfortable with things. Let me show you a couple things you can do in the intro here to make things nice and spicy. One, and this is kind of doable, I think, for beginners too, is the final D you have, right? So, I'm being followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow. Right here, that D. Okay, a nice little flourish, little tag, whatever you want to call it, you can do, is you're going to want to basically pluck the bass note of the D chord, right? Or you could do the bass couple strings, but then you want to play basically what's called a D sus2, and then hammer on, if you can, that 2nd fret with your middle finger. And then play a D again, but if you can, end that 2nd D, that final D strum, so that this 2nd string 3rd fret note is the sort of highest in pitch note you're playing. It's a nice little sort of thing you hear in the album version, and it kind of gives you a nice little punctuation mark at the end of each line. So here's what that would sound like even with a simple strum, right? So I'm being followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow. Okay? Nice simple thing you can do there. It sounds nice and cool, right? Now, as far as the chorus goes, right? Let me stick to that simple strum for a little bit. The chorus is a bunch of G to D. Just a lot of G to D, right? 2 beats on each chord. And then after you do that 3 times back and forth, you're going to go to an E minor and to an A7. Now these are 2 very, very, I would say, approachable chords to play because they're just 2 fingers each, right? And you can use the same fingers you use for the E minor, you could use for the A7 if you want. You also could, be different about it if you want. But in either case, you're going to want to just do, right, a G to D, G and D, G and D, E minor, A7. Okay? If you sang for context, right? And if I ever lose my hands, lose my plow, lose my land. Okay? And you're going to start that section over again. Just G to D, G to D. And if I ever lose my hands. Okay, now here is the trickiest chord part of the entire song, in my opinion. You have a lot of fast changes. Now I'm going to simplify what Cat Stevens is doing. Well, what I'm going to show you is you're going to go from an E minor for 2 counts, A7 for 2 counts, D for 2 counts, and then a B minor for 2 counts. Okay? Now on the screen right here, you see 3 ways to play this. The 2 on the left are simplified, right? The far left version is just using this 3-finger version of B minor, no barring required, right? So if, right? You don't get as full of a strum, but what you do get is something that's a lot easier to play. What I like to do to keep things nice and simple is to E minor, A7, D, and then I do this 4-string version of B minor. This prevents you from having to kind of get into a bar chord position, and it sounds just fine, okay? So that's the sort of middle version there. You could use a full B minor if you want, right? Now, what Cat Stevens is doing, and a lot of teachers will show you this because they call it the correct way to do it. I don't think you need to do this. This is remarkably difficult to do fast and to sing and stay in the groove and sound polished. He's going from E minor to A7, and then he's going D for 1 beat, F sharp minor for 1 beat, and then B minor for 2 beats, right? So he's doing this quick change between the D, F sharp minor, and B minor. I would not even bother doing this unless you are a very fluent guitar player, right? The thing that he does when I've watched him live play it is he's not going to a full B minor and a full F sharp minor and a full B minor. He's sort of going to this F sharp minor as if it is the beginning of his B minor, right? Because he's putting his ring finger down, he's barring the 2nd fret, and then he puts these 2 fingers down for the B minor, kind of like I showed you in that middle version there, okay? So the whole chorus progression here, let me do it for you, with simple strums, sounds like this. I'm going to use the middle version of the B minor here, where I do this 4-finger version, right? Again, I think that is the most practical way to sort of strike a balance between what sounds good and what's easy. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I ever lose my hands, lose my plow, lose my land, and if I ever lose my hands, oh, if I won't have to work no more. Okay, and then the final 2 measures are just E minor to A7, and then D, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's how you play the chorus. Now you repeat that chorus for each body part, right? You lose your hands first, then your eyes, then your legs, and then your teeth, I think, or your mouth. Sorry, or that's the sort of order of things. That's how I remembered it when I would sing it to my kids growing up. When they were younger, they would let me sing to them at bedtime. Not so much anymore, but my daughter still remembers this one from bedtime, so I'm happy about that. So that's how you do the verse and the chorus. Let me do a version of the strumming now, which is a bit amped up for both of those, right? This is going to be a down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down, 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 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and no matter which strumming pattern you want to do, whether it's the simple one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The way to practice it is put on either my full playthrough or put on Cat Stevens, mute all your strings, and then just strum along with him. Okay, you're not even doing the chord changes. You're just getting your strumming hand. You're giving it that feel for the rhythm. And it might seem silly, but this is how you really get these strumming patterns under your belt and internalize them, is you work on just the strumming hand, get the strumming pattern you want to learn under control, right? So this next one I'm showing you though is down, 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 up, down, 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 up. And if you can, keep that 1 and 3 count strum nice and light and give the 2 and the 4 a bit more oomph. That's going to give things a bit more of just an organic sense of swell. You don't want, if you can avoid it, you don't want to do this, right? You could, but it's going to be a bit broad stroke. It's like making a nice painting or a nice drawing with a pencil that's not really sharp, right? It's kind of, you're kind of limited by the sort of dullness of the graphite and the pencil, right? But if you can kind of give it a fidelity of you know, down, 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 up, down, 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 up, it gives it a nice bounce. So here is what the verse and the chorus would sound like if we were doing that sort of strumming pattern, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, I'm being followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow, leaping and hopping on a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow. And if I ever lose my hands, lose my plow, lose my land, and if I ever lose my hands, oh, if I won't have to work no more. Okay? That is a nice sort of moderate one that is a bridge between the simplest possible strum and something a bit more advanced, right? Now, to get a bit more advanced with the strumming, what I like to do for the chorus, and this is what Cat Stevens does, I believe. He's just kind of doing a constant strum. Down, up, 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 down, up. But again, the way that he adds some sort of elegance to this is, I think there's a slight favoring of the bass note of whatever chord you're playing on the 1 count and 3 count, okay? And then the 2 and the 4 count are emphasized still. So that's going to sound like this. It's going to be trickier to do, but again, I have the benefit, I'm just being honest with you. I've practiced this one. I learned this song 20 years ago. I could never do the intro satisfactorily back then, but this strum I've been practicing since then and in the years since whenever I've occasionally tried to play this song. So it's going to sound like this, right? And this is just for the chorus, right? And if I ever lose my hands, lose my plow, lose my land, and if I ever lose my hands, oh, if I won't have to work no more, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and... Okay, one little tip here while I have you, before I leave the topic of strumming, on that hard part, E minor to A7 and D to B minor, you can simplify your strums just for that part and make it a bit more easier to approach. You could just do all down strums on the quarter notes, right? So if I won't have to walk no more. Okay, so it's kind of just simplifying. Anytime you run into hard things like this, right? Simplify it. Keep the same tempo if you can, because that's going to keep you and the audience that you're playing for, even if it's yourself or your family members, you're going to keep them in the groove if you keep the same tempo. It's okay if you lighten up on the complexity of the strum, right? Just keep the same pulse, the same beat, okay? So that's how you're going to strum the verse and the chorus. I have these all written up in my practice notes. The thing I'll say about the end of the song is there's a bridge. It's just going between E and A, 1 measure each, right? But he's using a real dramatic strum, and I have this written up like this, right? It's a down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down. Same strumming pattern he uses in Father and Son, I am pretty sure. But this is more dramatic, right? So, did it take long to find me? I asked a faithful lie. Did it take long to find me? And are you gonna stay the night? Now I like to end with an A7, right? This is the dominant 7 chord in the key of D. It juices up that transition back to the 1 chord, right? Nice and satisfying there. So, couple tips here. Just dramatic strumming. It's okay if you kind of almost slow it down just to give it some emphasized oomphness. But when you're doing the A, it sounds like he is sort of going to an A sus2, which is just taking off your 2nd string finger And that's going to sound like this, right? Did it take long to find me? I asked the faithful line. Did it take long to find me? And I'm kind of being a bit more free with my strumming on that A, right? Down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, up. Okay, I don't have that written out because this is one of those things you have to go by just feel. You don't need to do that sort of freestyle strumming there, but with any song, right, learn what's the prescribed or suggested strumming pattern from me or any other teacher. And as you get comfortable with it, you can occasionally, it's like a drumming, playing fills. I don't really drum, but you know, those fills are those things that happen that deviate from the main pattern. That's an example of what you can do there. But your A sus2 chord is going to be a good one to juice up that sort of, just give the sound some diversity, right, and make it sound good. And then A7, and then you go back to the very end. Now, the very, very end, he is strumming heavy, right? I'm being followed by a moonshadow, 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 leaping in. I believe on the album, he's emphasizing the 2 and the 4 counts. You can use whatever heavy strum you want. You can sort of be very free with it as well. But that's how he does it. And then in the final last line, he plays moonshadow, moonshadow, very lightly. Then he goes heavy again, moonshadow, moonshadow, and he lets that final chord ring out, and you're good to go. So that's how you play the entire song with your strumming, right? So in my playthrough that's on my website, you see how I do it using all these sort of tricks and stuff put together. Again, you can sort of follow along doing the simple strums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it's all there ready for you, okay? So that's how you can get by with the campfire version of this. No finger picking required. You don't need to worry about that F sharp minor in the chorus and all that sort of thing. All right, now friends, let's look at the intro to this song and learn how to play this. Now this is remarkably fun to play, but it can be quite tricky. So again, I'm gonna round a few of the corners, sort of show you some suggested simplifications in small ways. I'll talk about what Cat Stevens is actually doing as per my understanding, but you can get going with this one. Now, a couple things. Out of the gate, one of the hardest things about this intro is this stretch. You kind of need to get your pinky up here to the 5th fret of the thinnest string in order to play this. If that's difficult for you, there's 2 tips I have. Number 1, if you happen to have a smaller, shorter scale guitar, like a travel size guitar, I have a Taylor GS Mini. I made a video talking about how much I love that guitar. That sort of guitar makes this way easier to play because the frets are smaller, right? You also could put a capo on. It's going to change the pitch and the key, so you can't play along with Cat Stevens, but if you did capo 2, 3, 4, it's going to make the frets smaller. So that's going to be an easier stretch for you as well, right? The other thing you could do is, instead of doing like a D with your pinky up here, you could do index, middle, pinky. So you're kind of taking your ring finger out of the equation, and this sort of gives you it just makes it an easier stretch because you're not having to preserve your D majorness here and then add this up here as a note that you remove. Right? You can just sort of do this. This will help you get this chord shape down, but the downside of this is then you have to switch to a regular D pretty quickly. So again, this is going to be one of those negative parts about this intro, is it requires that 5th fret note, okay? Now, let me show you the first steps in learning this if you want to approach it like Cat Stevens, okay? So here is a tab on the screen. This is not the full tab, right? But this is this sort of is the broad strokes like outline, okay? And this is going to get you familiar with the chord shapes, some of the basic finger principles, and then we're going to add the flourish next. So first up, first measure here, right? Get your hand in that D shape, okay? Your left ring finger is actually going to stay, if you play it like me, your left ring finger is going to stay on this note for the entire time, the entire intro. So get it comfortable there. Okay, the circled 4th string open means your right thumb is playing it. Later on, this thumb is just plucking away on these bass notes, right? But again, let's go back to this simple version where I have it highlighted, okay? So the first thing you get comfortable with after you get this chord under your belt, you're gonna have to get comfortable plucking that thinnest string a few times, then taking your finger off of it, and then going to 2nd fret of the thinnest string, right? I'm being followed by It kind of roughly mimics the melody of the vocals there, right? And then you're going to go to this G. Now, technically, this is like a G over D, a G/D, a G with a D bass note. Or you could say this is a D sus4, but then I'm not playing the third string. So let's just call it a G. I'm just keeping things nice and simple here. I'm using my ring and pinkies fingers on the thinnest 2 strings, 3rd fret, okay? And you're gonna go back to a D, and then you're gonna have this move where if you wanna do it, again, like Cat Stevens, and this is an iconic part of the intro, I think, is you have this bass note, which I play with my wrapped thumb, 2nd fret of the thickest string to the 3rd fret of the thickest string. I'm using my left thumb and then left middle, okay? Technically, you could use your index finger to do this, but it's gonna be tricky because you're using that finger in other places. So there's fast finger movement happening either way. But in either case, okay, that is how it sounds when you put it all together in this sort of broad strokes version. Thumb to middle, do a light strum of the middle strings, right? Your hand should just be in this position anyway because you want to keep these 2 fingers here, okay? Just do a light strum, 2nd fret, 5th string, open 5th string, and then open 4th string. And then do that little tag I taught you earlier in the lesson. Okay, so this whole broad strokes version is going to sound like this. I'll do it again. Okay, I did not write in the timing in my tab here because at first I don't think you should worry about the timing. You just want to get your hands used to these chord shapes and these specific notes. Okay, again, all the right thumb notes are circled and highlighted in yellow. That's going to give you a reference to what we're going to do when we move to this next version. Okay, so here's what we're going to switch to here. Now again, that previous version I showed you, you want to get comfortable with that, but here is how to do this. First half, droning thumb on the 4th string, okay? Actually, the nice little exercise I would recommend doing is this. Do a D major chord, okay? Pluck the open 4th string just repeatedly, and then pluck the 2nd string with your index finger. I would consider this almost the engine of everything. Because again, this ring finger is gonna stay here the entire intro, okay? And once you get comfortable with that, okay, first measure. I was just doing the first measure on repeat there, and I have the benefit of having practiced this a lot earlier this morning and all week long. So if you're just getting started with this, give it some time, okay? Just get through this lesson, understand what you have to do, get my practice sheet here with the tabs, and then you can follow along, but just focus on doing this first. Okay, once you can do that, right? So 5th fret on the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So on the first 3 of the first 4 eighth notes, you're going to play that 5th fret note. Then you're going to take it off and play the 2nd fret note on the thinnest string on the 4 count. Now Cat Stevens, he is doing a hammer-on from 3rd to 2nd fret on that 4th quarter note, the 4 count of the first measure. I'm not going to mess with that at all. I think it is ridiculously tricky to play fluently. And if you watch Cat Stevens play this in his later years, he's still around, he flubs that. Like, he can't do it cleanly, at least on whatever live version I was referencing. I wouldn't even bother with it. Just do 5th fret and then retreat to a regular D, right? And just play the 2nd fret note on the 4 count of the first measure. Okay, so okay, then you're going to go to this G with the D bass note. And then just take the first 3.5 beats of this measure and repeat them. I can't stress enough how helpful it is to just break things into chunks, practice them, find a groove, find a slow tempo that works for you, play things correctly, right? I'm just repeating this little section right here. Okay, if you repeat that first measure, okay, then repeat the first part of the second measure. Yeah, this is how I learned piano, so I owe this to my piano teacher. She was great at sort of stressing that you want to break things into chunks, practice the chunks individually, as slow as you need to, when you're not making mistakes, and then combine them. When you combine them, you're going to find it more difficult because you kind of have to combine these two worlds in your brain. And it might be rough at first. Just take it slow, right? Okay, I combined them there, and I just found another little sort of clustered bunch of riffs that I could repeat. Repetition is your friend. A couple notes before we move on is see those threes that are on the second string in the second measure that are like lighter written in. Those are more filler notes as opposed to the main notes, right? The main notes is the parts you would hum if you're in a pub drinking pub songs. Da, 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 da. Right? But those filler notes are a realistic part of guitar playing, in this style especially, where your kind of fingers there anyway, just do a light brush, right? Whoops, I see I was cheating. I was doing this D. It's easier to do, but it's harder to pull the whole riff off with because you have to move. Okay, then we move into this thumb thing. Okay, I showed it to you in the previous step. You can just skip it. If this is giving you trouble, just skip the thumb altogether and just come into the one count. Right? Right? Bass up, down, up, bass up, bass up, bass. Again, bass up, down, up, bass up, bass up, bass. When I say bass, I'm talking about those highlighted notes, and when I say up, I'm talking about up or down strums. But these are all filler strums. Notice how they're lightly written in there. That's an essential part of this. And you end it with that tag. So the whole intro, right? Whoop, no, I find that I'm successful if I pinch with these two fingers initially. Okay, here's a fun little fact. I just realized. You know how we're droning this bass note for the first part of the riff? Look in measure 3. I'm really favoring this third fret of the second string. That is the note D. This is the note D. So we have lots of droning D bass notes in this intro. Again. Okay, hope that's helpful for you all. Yeah, that's how you play it. Again, this is not exactly necessarily what Cat Stevens is doing, but it's going to help you out. Now, one last thing here. I want to talk about my secret stash version of this riff. This is a version that uses the same chord progression and the same chord shapes in many cases, but it just says, I'm not going to play it like Cat Stevens. I'm going to do it totally simpler and more chill. It sounds like this. Technically, you could sing over that, right? Is sun being followed by a moon shadow? Moon shadow, moon shadow, leaping and hopping on a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow. Okay, I went off the rails a little bit there. So that's in my PDF as well, that secret stash version. I just want to include that because I was practicing that a lot as I was getting ready to get into this lesson, y'all. But that's how you put the entire song together. Check out the entire playthrough. The full thing's on my website. It shows you how I take all this stuff and I put it into one package if you want to access things. I also have these practice notes available showing you the notes, chords, tabs, strumming, fingerstyle, all that sort of stuff that I have that I reference in this lesson. And I link to a song sheet as well over on my webpage if you want to get the lyrics and chords written up in a nicely formatted way. And that's going to be it, y'all. Cat Stevens, Moonshadow. I hope you had fun with this one. A final note, just really quick. I had this book from 2000, and I probably bought it in 2001, 2, 3. And I never could play Moonshadow because what's in this book is so precise and specific and opinionated with its fingerstyle approach, and doesn't match what Cat Stevens plays live, at least in some cases. Now, maybe he recorded it differently than he plays it live, so I realize that it's not always the same. But my point is, find a version that works for you, okay? I beat this drum a lot. I don't think we need to play things exactly like the artist in all cases. And I tried to, in my lessons, like this one, simplify things where it makes sense to, right? Doing that D to F sharp minor to B, that's not going to be approachable for a lot of us. So let's simplify things. And I say all this too, because I might have said this just now, but like me trying to learn this song 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, using this book, I would always give up. And literally until the past week, I even with the intro, I kind of was initially just going to teach you my secret stash version because I couldn't play it like Cat Stevens. But then I was watching him play it live. I watched a few other lessons, and I'm like, oh, he's just droning the fourth string. That makes it way easier, actually, right? Now, I don't mess with that hammer-on, that pull-off he does. It's just... It's technically doable for me because I've been practicing a lot. I'm in the groove right now, but until the last day or two, it wasn't, and especially on this bigger guitar, it wasn't. So you don't need to play it like the artist in all cases. You can use simplified versions, and you can have a lot of fun with the song, and that's what it's all about. I'm going to take off now, y'all. Thanks for watching. Head on over to my website to get all the good stuff that I have for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and bye-bye.